Hello again, here today with a bit of a quick replay rehash. Back at it again in the Moskva as soon as this replay would load up. Come on now. Alright, client taking a bit longer than I would like, but I would prefer not to just restart the recording, so we'll leave it as is. Anyhow, as my replay logs me through, we're in the Moskva. This was a dived game. Unfortunately, I didn't record it while it was live, but it is pure tier 10 matchmaking. My div mates are in a Smolensk and a Worcester, so as a result, because of where I position myself, I'm going to be operating mostly independently for the majority of the match, as you will see. So of course, the goal of this replay cast today is just to take another second look at a bit of an updated gameplay review of playing the Moskva in open water and what you can do to stay alive in such circumstances. So, okay, we're spawning here on mountain range. Threat-wise, the biggest threats to me in this match are obviously going to be the destroyers and battleships. The destroyers in this case, however, are two Harugmos, which means that they will tend to spam things that drift too close to them. But torpedo-wise, they're not too much of a threat. Battleship-wise, however, they do have two Yamatos and an Ohio. The GKs, I don't need to worry about. However, the Ohio population tends to be made up of fairly good players thanks to the requirements to get her through the research bureau and the regrind. There are some not as great Ohio players here and there, I'm sure, but for the most part the player base is such that the average Ohio player is probably better than your average battleship player. Now, so as you saw here, I spawned here, and because of my large detection circle as a Moskva at 14.1 kilometers, I almost immediately began executing my turn. So I'm pretty nice and reversed at this point. I got the right angle I want. Notice how I'm really quite flat still right now, but I will work to correct that angle before anything detects me. My Kleber has been in the cap for some time now, but remember he's a Kleber, so he's the fastest GD into the cap. And as I reverse, I'm right about angled now. So this angle protects me from only currently one side. So I'm angled against this cluster here right now. Not perfectly angled. If I get shot at, I'm going to take shells, but I have plenty of time to correct because all the battleships are still at 24 plus kilometers. Here you can see me taking some shots at the Harugmo from range, and thanks to the Moskva's excellent dispersion characteristics, even at 18 kilometers, it's very easy for me to reach out with my high explosive shells and land some shots. Turning away from them here, adjusting my angle as the GK kind of pulls up. The GK is still out of range at 23 kilometers, but best to be safe. The Yamato on this side, on the other hand, is well within my range. Just going to snap out of my personal view because I'm not doing anything in particular. So, you'll note that after I got into my turn, that was my priority, just to get into the right position, and only now am I reversing in to take radar positions. Now, of course, if the enemy did rush the cap immediately, and this Kleber wasn't there, then they could have potentially taken the cap and I wouldn't have been able to radar it if they stood on the edge, but that's not nearly as important as me keeping myself alive so we can potentially contest for a recap later. You can see me here shelling the Yamato from range. Note that comparatively I'm nice and angled. As I'm bringing all three guns to bear at this point, I'm now pretty broadside to both him and the GK over here. So note the GK did shoot me as I snap back out of personal cam, but before it even comes, I'm fixing my angle, and I only take one glancing hit. The Yamato, on the other hand, I'm well angled against, so I took one shell here, but the shells that struck me on this side did bounce off. Now, as the Yamato shifts out behind cover, I do shift my fire over to the GK briefly. The Harugmo does get spotted again, just outside of my radar range. Note how I'm trying to keep myself within radar range of B. Just hovering in and out, kind of just on the edge, so if they start capping from the edge I won't be able to immediately contest the cap, but with a little bit of reversing I can easily put myself back into range. The Harugumo is torpedoing, but he's not even close to being in range of torpedoing me with his 12-kilometer torpedoes, so I don't even have to move. Personal cam wise, I'm still just harassing battleships at range with my 21 kilometers at this point in this replay, made yesterday on patch 0.8.9. I do have the legendary module, so you can see me flicking in and out of the binoculars here. So it may not be abundantly clear what I'm doing to you, it might just be a shaky cam simulator as far as you're concerned. But what I'm doing is I'm flicking in and out between shots. So I zoom in on my target, I take my shot, and I look out. And so I'm looking at the areas where the battleships could be, because the battleships are the key threats to me. So this cluster of battleships over here is behind this rock. I'm basically covered by this rock in the center over here, so that's this one against them. Or I'm relatively angled. You can see here the Yamato over there taking a pot shot, but even if he had hit me, and he doesn't because he assumed I was moving forward and I was in fact reversing, they would glance off my side. But every time I take a shot, I'm flicking in and out of vision. My damage is not very high. This is because, of course, I've only been working with one gun for a lot of the game in order to keep myself safe, but I have been able to contest B, and we do eventually secure it as a result of my efforts. The Harugumo, well, the Harugumos are never really going to cap versus the Shimakaze and Clever. A bit under-angled there, you'll see, so the Yamato does slam me once. But I'm harassing him back quite extensively. And in terms of my angle here, now you can see the booster range module opening up. But more importantly, there's also an Ohio that popped up at 26 kilometers. Am I angled against a GK? Ohio, not quite as much, so I do need to be careful of Ohio over there. I'm on the edge of his operational range. Booster here spamming me now. Imagine he was a Smolensk, these would be landing quite a bit closer, but a lot of them would be shattering. So in response to getting harassed by an HE spammer, I just simply accelerate away using my 36 knots of speed. Bring my Moskva back up to speed. Harugumo may be threatening to pop there. I'm watching him. So I'm just waiting for him to smoke up, and if he smokes, I'll just radar. I won't be able to shoot him myself, of course, but I have a Clever and a Shimakaze that are in front of him. And he does start to fade, so I immediately pop my radar. Just very determinedly clinging onto B here while being open water, harassing all the battleships over here, essentially. Just continually applying HE pressure to the Yamato, who, as you can see, is not really doing very much to me. As long as I maintain sufficient angle and respond properly to his shells, I will always dodge the shells. Staying nice and out in the open, but almost always ready to radar for B if necessary. And as you saw there, the Harugumo did die, partially because of my radar. Again, harassing the Yamato, just setting fires. No point switching to AP at all at this point. Just want to continually set fires, and I'm going to try and switch between targets, since this is a random game, to apply pressure, some HE pressure from the smoke over there, so I just pull away a little bit. You can see that in spite of my sluggish Russian turning circle, the Moskva does accelerate quite nicely, so long as you start in advance. Again, as I pull away from the harassment, I slow myself down, keep myself in range. I don't want to quite pass through the ridge because I want to maintain fire. I'm pretty broadside to this Yamato, but he's not paying that much attention to me. So I'm fairly safe, taking some shots at him since I lit the other Yamato on fire. But as you can see, the mountain is blocking some of my flat shells. Still mainly backgun only. But at this point we do set what should be a lethal fire. Gonna fire into him a couple more times to make sure we get that kill. Just glancing, the Ohio is still not shooting at me. The GK is not at an angle where he can kill me. So I'm perfectly content at this point to just reverse back into my initial position, kind of right beside where I spawned, honestly, just with my butt pointed towards the caps, and switch onto other targets. Harassing the Moskva temporarily. Up to 78,000 now. Still barely taking any damage. Popped one heal, and that's about it. Moskva does take some torpedoes. Nope, no he's not actually. He's gonna pop into cover. There's a Des Moines over here which I could be shooting. But it's kind of hard to see his silhouette, so I chose not to shoot him. I did notice him though. You see me speculatively switch to armor piercing here. Glance up at the Des Moines, but he accelerated forward, so instead we're gonna hit the Moskva instead. Who looks pretty angled on the minimap, and I'm not a Stalingrad, but as you can see here, my shells are high enough velocity to still punch right through at that angle. Now the enemy is advancing quite far onto my side, but thanks to that ridge I've placed beside me, the ones that can actually citadel me potentially are pretty much covered. GK again behind me. Finish off the Moskva with my armor-piercing shells. Take a speculative shot at something. We'll try to Zhao, but he probably will turn away. So we switch back to high explosive. Still maintaining our angle. Do watch the Yamato though, as these two crest any of the gaps they can potentially shoot at me. See the Zhao potentially starting a turn. So I'm going to switch back to armor piercing. Still holding my angle, still angled against the Ohio if he were to shoot me. As you can see here, if he were to shoot me as now, these shells are going to mostly glance off my side. Let's see if I respond. Nope, I in fact do give him an even more broadside, but he does end up missing thanks to me reversing. Take a bit of a denting hit from the Des Moines and Zhao here. So given the Des Moines and Zhao are both firing armor piercing, I'm going to adjust my angle to kind of keep myself safe against them. Now I don't have the improved bounce angles and ricochet angles of the Des Moines, so I am going to have to expose relatively a lot of broadside compared to him. But I still have 3 heals, still have my damage control up. Very healthy, so using my expert loader to just switch over to armor piercing, Zhao's giving me a nice flat side. He's accelerating even though he was reversing before. I readjusted my angle to angle against that guy. And the Zhao I'm broadside too, but he switched to armor piercing, or high explosive, sorry, so I anticipated that he probably wouldn't shoot me. Now at this point I've lost sight of the Yamato, and if you'll note my position, in free cam, he actually is in a position where he can punish me, so he does open up. So here I could have gotten very punished. Unfortunately for him shooting at me does make me kind of wake up. And he shoots very, very short. So at this point I'm watching him, I'm correcting my angle inside the Des Moines radar now, but I'm not going to give him a second shot. It's very easy for me inside the 30-second window to just adjust my angle. Thanks to him missing. The first salvo, of course, that he fired at me could have gone a lot worse. He could definitely have punished me. There you saw him hit me for just 4,000, but he actually hit me with 7 shells there. I only took 1 penetration, so that kind of tells you how many of his shells I ricocheted off my side. If I had zoomed in live during the game, you would have been able to hear the shells bounce off my armor. At this point the game's pretty cleanly over. We've held CB for essentially the majority of the match, thanks to both my efforts and the efforts of my teammates, including my lovely division mate here, Mr. Wooster, and of course Smolensk, who did take the risk of getting close but was unfortunately punished for it. But we're essentially 14 minutes through the match. I've been under fire for most of the match from battleships, and I've failed to take any damage, thanks to just positioning in a way where I can easily angle against their shells. And against any HE pressure that came towards me, such as the Des Moines and the Zhao, and also earlier the ranged module Wooster, all I had to do was simply press down on the accelerator and we pulled away. You'll note from my potential damage that I have been quite extensively shot at, I just failed to take damage, thanks to my positioning. And now at the end of the game, I did pull quite a ways away from the cap, but you'll note all the DDs have already been dead for a while. So there's really no pressure for me to have to use my radar at this point. Just cleaning up threats, using my long-range gunnery. Trying to squeeze out what damage I can, but not really anticipating getting anything in before that Yamato drops, and indeed the game does end. Now it's a replay, sorry about that. So I'm just gonna pull this up. Hopefully this records. Please capture my chrome. Alright, 1 second. Why is this not capturing my chrome? Come on now. Alright, that's annoying. 1 second. Sorry to do this on recording, but occasionally. Oh, of course it's following the wrong window. There we go, Jesus Christ. So anyway, I did take some screenshots this time, so thankfully, even though it's a replay cast, we do get the scorecards. So we end up doing 162,000 damage, over 169 shell hits, with 2 incaps, 2 kills, 7 fires, 5 citadel hits, and 9 defended ribbons from holding battleships off, mostly in this case. Team score wise, we ended up at the top, just simply by staying alive and shooting things to death. At 2100 base experience, obviously quite respectable. So this is a bit different, but you'll note from my final position on the map, essentially where I spawned, but just in reverse, that I didn't have to actually go anywhere thanks to my enormous range and Russian armor. I could just sit out in the open at the honestly quite horrific B cap on mountain range with 0 cover, and it wasn't a problem at all. By just controlling my range, controlling my positioning, and controlling my angle, I was able to stay out in the open and exert influence to just keep clawing away at damage. Now at the beginning of the match, you'll note as I switch over to the 3rd page of the detailed report, there's a bit of damage down here, but the majority of my damage is here. It's just this Yamato here that I harassed for most of the game, and the Moskva would represent any pushing threats that were on my flank. So as they push in, I harass them with either high explosive or armor piercing as applicable, and when they get too close onto my side, all I do is simply pull down on the accelerator and pull away to re-engage my angle and draw that triangle that you want to form in order to properly angle your armor. And you'll see potential damage-wise, as I mentioned, 1.8 million. I ended up soaking up 67,000 damage, but I wasn't even remotely concerned about dying. I ended the match at about 20,000 health and with 1 heal charge left. And just to wrap this up, I'm going to pop back onto clients just to show off the Moskva's armor. So you'll excuse me as this loads up. Going to black this for just a little bit so you'll see the chrome but not World of Warships just momentarily. As I log in, to my account and take a swig of coffee because coffee is important to stay running. Sorry about the delay, but you know how it is. The client does take a little bit of time to log in, thanks to the relatively archaic architecture of the software. Wow, this is actually taking a fair bit of time. As I mentioned, sorry about the wait. I guess you're just staring at my scorecard screen, very unentertained. Alright, there we go. Let me just pop this back up. And yes, it's a image of the Kaga, not what's relevant to us. So let me just flick over to my Moskva. So here is the Moskva. My clan has, okay, I don't care. Here are my modules. Very standard stuff, just radar, aiming systems, steering gears, concealment systems, and legendary module. Now if I didn't have legendary module, I would be running reload. That cuts you down to 19 kilometers of range, but does have a slightly better main battery reload, of course. At just about, was it 13%? 12%. So with legendary module, in case you don't know what legendary module does for the Moskva, it increases your main battery firing range, putting you up from 19 to about 21, and decreases dispersion by 11% at the cost of 13% traverse, which is exactly the same as reload module. So you won't feel any difference in your turret traverse, but instead you get a longer reload but tighter shells. So this, together with aiming systems modification 1, gives you an 18% improvement to your dispersion, which gives you that pinpoint-like dispersion that the legendary module Moskva is known for. Now armor scheme-wise, if I just go to the exterior here, you can see the Moskva is nice and pointy, the classic Russian cruiser structure, just like the Stalingrad. And just like the Stalingrad, she has 50mm plates on her midsection. And this is the infamous Moskva armor. Note that she also has a 50mm icebreaker belt, which allows her to bounce shells that go too low as well, even if you are normally not quite angled enough. So if you go too bow in, but a foolish battleship decides to... Okay, I don't know why my mouse is not allowing to maneuver this. So if a battleship foolishly tries to shoot down here to try and get into the citadel behind it, because of your icebreaker belt, you're going to bounce the shells, especially at close range. Instead, where a battleship actually wants to aim, for those of you battleship players shooting at an armored cruiser like Stalingrad and Moskva, is at this 25 section here in the upper nose. So the 25 section here, this is where you're vulnerable. So as a battleship player, assuming the Moskva is either sitting still or moving slightly forward and not reversing, where I typically aim is I pop my spotter plane if I have a spotter plane, and I aim right at this front turret here, if he's sitting still, to try and get the shells to plunge into this section for just full pen damage, and to pen through into the citadel below, which if I take off this armor plate here, you'll see the citadel is right here. So if shells were to hit down obliquely at this angle, they'll punch through into the citadel armor. Let me just strip off the bow, yeah. So they would punch down and hit citadel plate like that. But anyway, as a result, you'll see that the 50mm plates on the Moskva at the front are quite good, but at the back they're quite respectable. Not as good, obviously, the angles aren't quite as good, but this 50mm plate is what I'm spending most of the game with my butt facing the enemy, bouncing shells off of. I'm trying to get shells to bounce off here, but also here. Of course, any shells that land too far onto your stern are going to pen you, and they can cause some quite lethal citadels if you're not careful or if you're unlucky, but that's why I spend most of the game kind of pointed like this. And so you can't see here, but because I'm shielding it, but basically this is the angle I'm trying to hold against most battleships. This is the triangle that I'm trying to form, and that's what allows me to bounce shells off. The shells come in at angles like this, or this, maybe not quite here, that's probably going to pen you, but anything from 90 degrees upwards that you draw in this triangle is the shell bounce angles that you want to achieve in order to function open water. And this frees you up from hugging behind an island. Now you'll note that for a lot of the game, because of this, I was only able to operate one gun turret. But that's fine. Even with one gun turret, you can do your job. And in the case of defending a cap, because you're so accurate, even with just 3 shells every 9 seconds, you should be able to land those shells onto a destroyer thanks to your high velocity Russian guns. The Russian guns are the second fastest guns, if I'm not mistaken, with an initial shell velocity of 985, beaten only by the Kronstadt. Okay, well Kronstadt actually has slower shells. I know Kronstadt has some kind of like record-breaking statistic. Maybe it might be penetration power at 15 plus kilometers, but who knows. Anyway, my point is, this gives you one gun, but the one gun is really easy to use. And just to wrap this off, I'm going to show you my Moskva build. This is my build. I do run Zemunensky over Kuznetsov, and so my build is priority target into expert marksman, into superintendent, into concealment expert, into fire prevention. Then we go back for the optional skills. I like taking expert loader first actually because I find shell switching to be very important in most heavy cruisers, but whether you take it or not is completely up to you. I think this is the most optional skill. Some people opt to take the improved preventative maintenance, particularly because they're using Zemunensky, but I find expert loader to be way better than any kind of preventative maintenance, so I prefer to take it even though I'm using a special captain where preventative maintenance is improved. But anyway, after that, followed up with improved high alert. This allows you to jam your damage control basically on cooldown. The way I play my Moskva, especially in clan battles, not so much in randoms, but in clan battles, is that I essentially damage control fires right as they get set on me, unless I'm under fire from 2 or more enemy fire spammers. Because Zemunensky cuts the damage control cooldown down to just about 45 seconds. So typically, if you're dodging, see here 45.6, if you're dodging enemy shell fire and kind of preventing yourself from getting relit, like at most what usually happens is that you damage control the fire and you get set on fire once immediately again, usually on your butt because of the way you're playing. And it's not the end of the world. It's as if you let a fire tick and whatever. A fire ticks on you for a little bit. The Moskva, unlike the Stalingrad, has normal fire time, so thanks to that, one fire ends up normal cruiser fire time, that is, fire duration in terms of damage she takes, so thanks to that, I have no problems with damage controlling on cooldown. This is, of course, something you need to play by ear. If you're under very intense fire, obviously don't do that. And of course, I take Adrenaline Rush with my last 2 spare points, and this is my full build. I've been using this for about 4 seasons now, 3 tier 10 seasons, I guess you could say, of clan battles, and has served me very well. And this is likely the build I would run on my Stalingrad as well. Now, if you have Kuznetsov, he's actually not a bad pick for the Moskva. But if you have Kuznetsov, maybe don't take High Alert and take Jack of all trades instead. But that's completely up to you, since Kuznetsov does have the improved Jack of all trades. Anyhow, that was just a brief re-review of the open water Moskva. The last time I did a replay cast like that was in 0.82, so I was just hoping to update the guide a bit for you guys and show off that it still works even in a world of fire spammers and much deadlier battleships. So hopefully that can help you stay alive in your clan battles endeavors, and I hope not to see my Russian cruisers be the first ones to die on my team. Thank you very much. Cheers.